incredibly philanthropic people that are like, I realize I have too much money. I have to, and I've got folks like that are just so unbelievably generous with their wealth, and it's just like, I don't deserve this, so I'm going to give it to,
it's
he probably has to run across those people all the time. There's some great folks that live here. There really are.
Thank you for being here. We're going to get rolling on this thing. I want to start this podcast with my friend Kevin Koppes of how we met, because the story is just an amazing
worthy of sharing
story and worthy of sharing. So Emily, my wife, and I, we had a tree hit our house, and it was right in the middle of COVID. So the hotels weren't open, and we found a place to live over in a little town called Manson, Washington, in eastern Washington by Lake Chelan. So we moved the kids over there, and I would still drive the pass back and forth because I'm a realtor. So I was, had clients over here, and a couple of times a week I'd bounce back, and there's no Costco in Chelan. So this specific trip, I came back and I had one job that was to get dog food. So I swung into Costco, bolted in, got dog food, and I buy the big 50-pound huge bag of dog food, and it's in the cart. I roll out to my Mustang, and as I put the cart right next to the back of the Mustang, it just dawned on me. I was like, how in the hell am I going to get this thing out of the cart and into my trunk without ripping the bag open? And I heard a man's voice just say, hey man, do you need help with that? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be awesome. So I backed up, whoever it was, lifted up the dog food, put it in the trunk, and then grabbed the cart and just walked away. And I was like, hey, thanks so much. Yeah, no problem. And I get the cart too. So I never even saw who that person was, really. And off he was. Super cool. People are great like that. They help me out all the time. Appreciate the offer and the help. And then I got in the car and drove back to Chelan. 2 days later, Emily and I are sitting at one of the wineries outside, and I went to use the bathroom, which was kind of behind the winery. And as I got up and rolled to the back, I went by my car, and a woman said, oh, excuse me, is that your Mustang? And I said, yeah, it is. And she went, well, this is kind of random, but can I ask you how you drive? She said, I'm a physical therapist, and I work with kids with disabilities, and I'd really love to see your hand controls. And I went, yeah, no problem. So, I opened up the car, and she got into the car and was playing around with my hand controls and
I didn't know
up
that
and
part
down.
of it.
Yeah. And she, she was just practicing. We were talking about it, and I was answering all these questions, and she went, oh, okay, thank you so much. It's awesome. I appreciate it. And then she and I walked back into the winery area, and I stopped at our table, and then she walked across the yard, basically is what it is, and outdoor seating, and just sat down. And I don't know how many minutes it was later, but it was a few minutes later, all of a sudden you walked up to my table.
Well, I saw as she came to me and sat down, I saw you behind her, and I thought, I know that guy from somewhere. Where do I recognize that guy? And then it clicked to me, and I had not shared the story with Amanda. And I learned from Amanda, I'm like, I helped that guy load dog food from Costco into his car a couple days ago, and then so she and I were starting to talk about it, and she's telling me all about the hand controls that you're typical Amanda. I did not surprise me at all that she wanted to jump in the car. I want to do that later.
Yeah.
But we then were like, hey, we got to go say hi. And so then we went over, introduced ourselves.
You came over and introduced yourselves and said, hey, did you get the dog food here all right? Yeah. And I looked up at you and I was like, what? And then I thought, no, it was you that 48 hours before had been the guy that put dog food in the back of my car.
Yeah, how awkward it would have been if you didn't remember me.
Yeah, right. Well, I didn't know who you were.
That's true. Yeah, you hadn't seen me.
But,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, there was only one person in the world who had helped me put dog food in the car. So then you guys came and joined us, and you came and joined our table. And then as we were talking, just to make the story even more random, somehow the conversation came up that I was a fishing hunting guide up in Alaska, and that's when I got injured and put myself in the wheelchair was because I was working for that lodge. And Amanda said, oh gosh, my brother and dad go up to a fishing and hunting lodge up in Alaska. Where is it? And I said, oh, it's in Southeast Alaska. It's called Pybus. And she went, Point Lodge. And then she pulled up her phone and pulled a picture up of her dad and brother sitting underneath a sign that I made, staying in the lodge that I helped build. Mm-hmm. 20, 30 years before.
Yeah, and the conversation continued, and we realized we knew different people or the same people in different organizations or nonprofits or people who do fundraising. So
and then about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, I was back on the western side of the mountains, and I was sitting in the parking lot in Rite Aid, and she walked in front of my car. And I just hit the horn and I rolled my window down. I was like, are you stalking me? Yeah. And she looked back and went, no, I think you're stalking me. So within a 2-week period of time, I ran into you at Costco in Woodinville. And then we ran into both of you in Chelan. And then I saw Amanda again in Woodinville, and we've been friends ever since.
Yeah.
Totally random story. On that
is.
One. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Had I only known, though, what I know now.
Both of us would be like, what the?
Yeah. I would have been like, you get that dog food on yourself, bro. And I think I had actually gone, you said you went for dog food only. Randomly, I went for toothpaste. Oh. Who goes to Costco for like just toothpaste? Yeah. But whatever reason, I had that. Yeah. And so.
It's so funny. So, yeah. I mean, and you don't ever go to Costco for one thing. I mean, it's $100 or more. So the fact that we were both there, it's just...
Or you walk out with something that you didn't intend to walk out with. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thanks for being here today. It's been fun to, get to know you and Amanda. And one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you to be, or one of the reasons why I asked you to be, a part of this podcast was because it's about mindset and the whole idea of mindset. And from my world of being in a manual wheelchair, I focus on accessibility as a mindset because, I love to say this. I say it to everybody. If everybody in the world was in a wheelchair, the whole world would be wheelchair accessible, which means that it's possible. So in the world of accessibility, for me, it's not about the feature set of accessibility. It's not about the grab bar or the ramp. It's about the mentality and the attitude behind why do we need the grab bar and the ramp, and how are we going to put it in? And
how can we normalize it, basically?
And how does it? Yeah, exactly. That's perfect way to describe.
Because if everyone was in a wheelchair, it would be normal. It would just be normal.
Well, and having put myself in a chair when I was 22, and now I'm mid 50s, it's my normal, but not everybody else's. So sharing that mindset, and with what you do, and and the situation in your life that you're in, I thought it was perfect for you and I to talk about mindset. So. Give me a little bit of your story, of why we're here and the idea of epilepsy, because you have epilepsy.
Yeah.
Where has that driven your life? And I know I'm asking 3 different questions at once, but give me a little bit of your story.
So I'll share my story with epilepsy, but let's talk maybe a little bit about just mindset. My personal mindset, and I can't really explain it other than I've always felt a sense of like, just natural compassion towards people who have disabilities. And I think it's, again, I can't explain it, but I think it's, my mindset is until I meet someone who has openly welcomed the opportunity to have cerebral palsy, or, openly welcomed the opportunity to, be paralyzed, or, or have epilepsy, I cannot not help them. And so I think in your case, it was just like natural that, I went over and offered to help, and you could have said screw you or whatever, but it almost would have felt more awkward to just walk past you, I think. And again, I can't, it's just always been a part of like my mindset, I guess.
Right.
But personally, I grew up with epilepsy. I'll kind of share my journey here. So I had encephalitis when I was very young, 1 or 2 years old. So very young. Pretty severe case. So it left, scar tissue on my brain. And I went all the way through elementary school having what I could only describe as like panicky sensations, that just a feeling that didn't feel right. And as a little kid, I didn't really have words for it, so I just kind of like let it happen. And it was only about 10, 20 seconds long. And the funny thing is I was completely conscious while it was happening. So I could be having one like while we're talking right now, and I knew just something didn't feel right. And I only had them maybe 2 or 3 times a year. So I wasn't having them like every day. So what happened, I would kind of let it pass. I would go back to playing with my friends, and I didn't say anything to my parents about it, which sounds kind of funny. Yeah. And I think twofold, maybe it would be my parents might look at it and say, well, that's just normal, or, get over it kind of thing. Or I think a part of me felt it was just normal. Like all kids had this because I didn't have anything else to compare it against.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah, I really didn't, and this was just like, I don't know that's not normal. Right. Yeah. So I just kind of like would let it happen, and I would go about. And then my freshman year in high school, you're hitting puberty, body's changing. My brother finds me on the front porch of our house when he gets home, and I'm passed out on the front porch. And I think he then, assumed that someone had jumped me and went into the house. So he looked around and then called 911. That turned out that was a seizure, was unwitnessed, but it was a seizure. And, I'm sure I had another one a couple days later, go to the doctor, I get the diagnosis of epilepsy, start medicine. At some point along those lines, I spoke up about these feelings. I was able to draw the connection.
Right.
Of course, as I was learning more about epilepsy and that there's more than one type of seizure. So it was, concluded that seizure I had on the front porch is probably, they call it tonic-clonic seizures now. Back in the old days, it was grand mal seizures. So I spoke up about these feelings, and turns out those were seizures that I was having as a kid.
Wow.
And they're just called focal aware seizures. So folks have those types of seizures where they're conscious while it's going on. And so we went through that journey of medicine, high school, college, one medicine after the other, trying to find something that can control the seizures. Never found any complete solution to it. A year or two out of college, I had brain surgery. So they talked about that, and they realized that it was the scar tissue in my brain after, of course, lots of testing. Concluded that it was scar tissue from that encephalitis infection that was causing the seizure. So fortunately for me, which is not the case with everybody, but fortunately for me, it was in an operable area where they could go in and do a resection. So they removed part of that scar tissue area, and then I was seizure free for a year, got my license, got a 98 black Mustang. Life was good. Then driving back from Christmas, at my folks' house, I was living in San Francisco at the time. Driving back to San Francisco, I'm driving the Mustang on the freeway. I felt that panicky feeling again.
Wow.
As a kid. And I'm like, this can't be true. I don't have these anymore. Right. And so I just kind of kept on driving, thinking it was deja vu or something would go away. Next thing I know, I wake up and I have a voice in my head that's saying, I'm an off-duty fireman. Hang out here. Don't move. There's help on the way. And turned out I had went into a seizure in the car going probably 80 to 90 miles an hour on the freeway.
Wow.
And, fortunately, everyone survived. Folks were fine. I went into the center divide and kind of crashed there. And then here I go. I'm starting the journey all over again. I'm having seizures again. Spiraled into major depression. Life sucked for sure for a couple of years there. I was lucky to have some very understanding, compassionate friends that I was living with in San Francisco. Bachelor pad with some guys, and they kind of got it. And they had seen me have seizures in college.
How old were you at this point?
So this was probably mid-20s. Okay. So year or two out of college. And then, just all over again. And then I had a job in San Francisco, and I was having seizures on the streets. I was having them on buses, on the train. I had a seizure where I wandered off a train platform and fell onto train tracks. And the good thing is the train was running late. So the bad thing is there was a ton of people standing around and watching me have an embarrassing episode of something that happened. So I woke up in the ambulance. So I didn't see wasn't ever to thank whoever may have jumped on the tracks or not, or if they called 911. And I'm drawing out a longer story, but long story short, I moved up to Seattle after getting married, met with a whole new group of neurologists. The level of care is unbelievable. And they said, hey, maybe they didn't get enough of that area. Second operation 15 years ago, and I've been seizure free since then.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Still on a little bit of medicine. I came off the medicine after being seizure free, and I had a seizure. Was probably deemed a withdrawal seizure because my body had been on medicine since high school, essentially.
Got it.
But I'm still on small dose. So that's my story and how I got connected. So now I work for the Epilepsy Foundation.
Right.
And I saw that they had a camp. I don't know how I came across their website. I've now been working for the foundation for 15 years. And so this was like 2007 when I started as a volunteer. I saw that they had a camp for kids with epilepsy. So volunteered as a camp counselor. 2 years into that, the executive director at the time said, hey, we're looking to hire. I was a little unhappy in the corporate job I was in, so I quit my job and made a total 180, went back to school and got a master's in nonprofit management. And I've been with the Epilepsy Foundation ever since, in a variety of roles. I'm now the executive director in a couple different states, so Washington, Oregon, and Alaska. So
fantastic.
But back to yours, again, you running into you, it was just natural kind of a thing that I saw you and you needed help. So put my toothpaste down, went and helped you with the dog food, and off we went. Little did we know it was going to spiral into this,
yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's amazing because from my perspective, that experience, that happens to me, that people will just come out of the woodwork and offer help. And I've always been one, always, even before I put myself in the wheelchair, was, that it's okay to ask for help, that you're stronger when you ask somebody else for help, because that's the mindset of help is not a positive experience for many, that if I have to burden you by asking you for help, it means that I can't do it by myself and I'm a weaker person because of it. But yet that is a perfect example of, well, when you offered help and I humbled myself enough to accept the help, even though I was kind of hoping for it anyhow, that I then gained your strength.
Yeah.
So now you and I together, even though we don't even know each other's names, I have no idea who you are. You've just helped me accomplish something that would have been really complicated for me to do by myself. And I probably would have ripped the dog food bag and there would have been food everywhere. And I would have
laughed super hard.
Laughed, and you should have. Well, now you know.
Well, now I would. No, I would not have laughed had I saw that. I probably would have asked for a broom or something.
Yeah, exactly. But that, you just, epitomize that whole, hey, it's okay to ask somebody for help. And then they have to be in the right mindset to accept that help.
Yeah.
Because there is a level of pride there of, well, I can do it myself. And to be honest, there are certain things that it's easier for me to do. Getting my wheelchair in and out of the car, it's easier for me to do it than it is for you. People offer all the time. Sometimes people don't offer, they just pick up my chair and push it at me. And that gets a little irritating.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I don't mind the offer because I can say no gracefully and say, you know what, it's actually easier if I do it by myself.
Yeah.
But not being worried about asking is huge.
It is. And it's not to at all minimize your situation, but the having epilepsy it's an invisible disability.
That's right.
And asking help makes it even harder because they're like, you look normal. Why are you asking for help? What do you mean you need a ride somewhere? Or it's extremely hard to explain. So a lot of people don't talk about it. I only tell the people that have to know,
Right.
So, but it's a pride thing. You're right. And asking for help, my friends had to give me a ride to work, lots of things that I needed to rely on them for. But you're right. I mean, I love what you said about we learn, we kind of build off of each other because, that's a great point.
As a group, we're stronger than we are as an individual.
Yep.
I know that there's multiple different types of epilepsy. Is that the best way to describe that? Yours, I didn't realize, was from when you were really young. So your whole life, you've had to deal with it
in some one way or the other.
Right. There's later onset where the first time it won't happen to somebody who's older?
No, let's say it can strike at any age at any time. So you, my friend, are not out of the woods yourself.
Got it.
Because it really can manifest itself in any way. And 70% of the cases, they don't know why and how it started.
Really?
And as you get older, you can attribute some stuff to stroke, some things like that. But I was in kind of that lucky 30% category where they were able to pinpoint, a focal cause for it, and then even narrow it down to where they were able to find an operable area. But I distinctly remember that doctor appointment where I had gone through the testing, and now we were going to find out if I was a surgical candidate or not.
Right.
And if the answer was no, I mean, that's a whole mindset in itself. It's like, here I am, and I had tried every medicine in the book. So that wasn't a solution. A lot of this was before. Nowadays, they've got, devices that they can implant in you, which wasn't out as much. I mean, the technology is just unbelievable how stuff continues to advance. They're doing laser surgery these days for epilepsy.
Wow.
And I mean, I think we're only 10 years away, and the doctors who are listening to this will probably laugh at me, but I think we're not too far from outpatient brain surgery. If they're doing like laser surgery and your recovery time is that fast, that, And again, we're gifted with smart people in our lives.
Yeah, we sure are. Yeah. Well, just, from my experience of, I've got this new wheelchair and it's made out of carbon fiber.
Oh yeah.
And it weighs 2/3 less than
Really?
what every chair I've ever had. And I don't know if Emily, my wife, and my kids like it more than I do, because they pick it up and put it in the car.
Yeah.
So just the technology of where it's come is just fantastic.
Yeah.
And letting that technology kind of drive us in the right direction.
Yeah.
So I want to bring it back to mindset a little bit. As the executive director of an organization like this, are you promoting research? Are you promoting support? What does the foundation do to help the community of epilepsy?
Well, we're services and program based with the fundraising component to it.
Right. Which I'm learning more about.
Yeah. Which you'll be assisting later.
That's
right. So we've got two biggest programs we're proud of here in the West Coast is, I mentioned the camp that I started as a volunteer.
Right.
And that's where the majority of our fundraising dollars go towards, is we pay for that camp for those kids to come, which brings in a lot of low-income families who couldn't otherwise, afford, because camps are expensive. It's like, $1,000-something to send your kid to a camp.
Right.
So we pride ourselves on that we, have these events, these fundraising events, so we can then turn around and pay for, campers, kids, and volunteers. The camp does bring in, kids, it's for ages 7 to 16. And then we ask them to kind of take a year off. And then when they're 18, they can apply to be volunteers.
Oh, good.
We've found that a year off helps differentiate coming back as an authority figure and not a camper.
Right.
So we force them to do that. In fact, to show you how long I've been around, I last year wrote known her since she was 7 when she started coming to camp, and I wrote her college letter of recommendation, for her. So I've known her for that long. So the camp is a big thing for us. We do camps in Washington and Oregon. We opened a camp in Oregon, that's probably 7 or 8 years now. After our Washington camp was getting so big, we were getting people coming from different states. And then on the adult side, because adults are impacted by epilepsy and need, attention, I feel, for that. And so we started we didn't start it, although it was founded here in University of Washington by the late Bob Frazier and Erica Johnson, both researchers at University of Washington, launched a program called PACES. And it is an adult self-management program for adults with epilepsy. And it's offered in like a cohort fashion where 5 or 6 people together go through an 8-week course once a week. In fact, I think they're getting together tonight. They go through 8 different chapters. One of the chapters talks about how to manage and cope with depression associated with epilepsy. Another topic is focused on the cognitive deficits associated with epilepsy, like memory, retention, and how to overcome stuff like just tips, for learning to overcome that. Social skills, stuff like that. So that's a big thing for us on the adult side. And then, support groups that we have for adults with epilepsy and parents, caregivers. My parents didn't really have much of a network. And this is my mission as an executive director, is to just talk more about it, and this is, perfect example in this podcast. But when I was a kid, the doctor that treated me, we were focused on medicine. We adjusted my medicine, obviously, because I was still having seizures, adjusted medicine, and then we left, and that was it. That was it. They never talked about resources available to my parents, support groups available to my parents, other stuff they could have benefited from. So my mission is to say, hey, docs, let's also talk about this in the doctor visits. Tell these parents about the Epilepsy Foundation and that these resources exist, and that, we have a camp where kids could then meet other kids. And the other thing I forgot to mention about our camp, in that we're unique, is it's open to siblings also.
Oh, okay. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. So siblings have a chance to then meet other siblings. So everybody understands it at the camp. Not everybody has epilepsy because it's siblings come, but they all speak the language. And we get a lot of parent volunteers who are then meeting each other and being able to network on that side. So it's a special opportunity for kids and families to come together and kind of like see that they're not the only one. That's right. And the same is true from a fundraising perspective, because we do have an annual walk that we do. And it's another good gathering moment for people to kind of look around and say, hey, I'm not the only one that,
that's
has
important.
epilepsy. And again, it's part of that hidden aspect to it, is even at the walk, you're kind of looking around, you're like, okay, who has epilepsy? Who's a caregiver here? Because you just don't know. And then, so it's really a special thing.
Well, it's a big thing. the invisible disability side of things, because obviously mine is noticed. I'm in a wheelchair, and there are some who don't want the wheelchair to be highlighted in their lives. Look at me, not my wheelchair, which I completely understand. I'm just the opposite of that. It's like, hey man, I'm in a chair.
It is what it is.
That's just, it's just my life. It's who I am. It's part of my, part of my persona now. But with epilepsy and with other, invisible disabilities, there has to be a different mindset, because like you said earlier, someone doesn't know unless you tell them. And you then get to choose when you tell them, hopefully,
Well, and then when you do that, you kind of sit back and wait for their reaction.
That's right.
And either they, I've gotten calls from folks that my son or my daughter was told she can no longer play on the soccer team because we told her, we disclosed that she has epilepsy, or they saw a seizure. And so because it's so stigmatized and people are, sort of afraid of it a little bit, so people are discriminated against. And, we get calls on occasion where people were arrested because they were in a seizure and someone called the police, not realizing, not being trained on that is a type of seizure. And so that's a frustrating, that's our job again, is to just talk about it and normalize it as much as we can. And when you do some of that, some of the time people will then become comfortable disclosing their own connection that they have.
That's right.
Oh, my brother has epilepsy, and they would never have thought to bring that up had you not mentioned it to them. And I very vividly remember I was talking with someone about whether he was going to disclose his epilepsy in a job interview. And we always, that's a really sticky topic. We kind of have to deflect it back to them. It's up to your comfort level and what you want to do. And he decided to disclose it. And he was telling me, he said, yeah, as soon as I said it, the guy, almost celebrated because his brother had epilepsy. And he was immediately able to relate and talk about his experience. And he's like, I was just so glad I did it. And, because, and of course he got the job, and he didn't have to talk about it when he started the job because this guy, he knew it. His brother had it.
Right.
So,
well, it's the same situation for me as when I was doing not even job interviews, when I was just meeting with people. I have a little bit of a formula of when I let them know I'm in a chair, because I don't want them to worry about it. I don't want them to be so focused on the fact that I'm in a chair, but they need to know, because if their office is up 3 flights of stairs, or if it's in a non-accessible situation, or even if the building, I need to get around the back, just right before the meeting, I'll say, hey, by the way, just want you to know I'm in a chair, and then here's the situation. And it usually, it curbs that fear of all of a sudden I come into the room and they're like, oh my God, we didn't know.
Yeah. And you have to, but it's not like the first time you talk to someone on the phone, hi, my name is Barry Long and I'm in a wheelchair. Just
exactly. That's right.
And I didn't, like when I load in your dog food, hey, my name's Kevin, I have epilepsy, just, in case you're wondering,
exactly.
We don't do that.
Well, what's interesting is just recently, I called you panicked, on a Sunday afternoon because someone very close to me had a seizure. Right. And it was super scary for everybody involved, and no one knew why or what to do or how to go next. And obviously I've now known you. I just picked up the phone and you brought me off the ledge. Yeah. And said, just about, everybody can have a seizure. Many people will in their lives.
1 in 10.
Yeah. Which is amazing to me. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that we found out that this individual was just very dehydrated, traveling, jumped up too fast, was excited, hadn't eaten anything that day. Nope. Boom, hit the ground. Nope. So I appreciate that education that you just gave to me, because I would have had no way of knowing that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's about communicating it.
It's about communicating it. And yeah, just the more you talk about it and the more people start to disclose, because there are plenty of people, there's lots, I think the number is 60, 70% of people are controlled on medicine.
Really?
Their seizures are under control.
Okay.
I know one guy that I work with that hasn't had a seizure since junior high, and he's now in his 40s, early 40s, I believe, but he's still on medicine. And he just he has no interest in coming off of it. You can grow out of epilepsy as a kid. You can have seizures as a kid, and as your body changes, mine changed for the worse when I hit puberty, because then I started having more. Others changed, in the other direction. Another friend of mine that probably only told me he had seizures because he knew where I worked, but he had it when he was a kid. He doesn't have them anymore. And once he found out where he worked, he's like, oh yeah, I had them when I was a kid too. So yeah, there is a sense of, I don't know what the word is, but just being able to, and again, like once you've seen a seizure happen, no matter how many you've seen, especially if it's a loved one, it's just not a pleasant experience. It's just not, but when you see that they're okay and that they're fine and that they can go back to what they were doing, a lot of kids at our camp, someone will have a seizure. And of course, the kids are in that awkward position of wanting to respect privacy, but also concerned that they're okay. Yeah. And so there's that balance. But, once you've seen a seizure, you see that they're fine. They can go about. It makes subsequent seizures not as bad. And I remember that with an employer when I had my first seizure, and then subsequent ones I had, I would have what's called an aura, where you can feel it kind of come on. It's a warning period. And I was tell them I'm going to have a seizure, and I would go into her office and kind of shut the door. But after she had seen that first one, she was like, okay, she was way more comfortable because she knew I was going to be okay. Right. Same in college. My college buddies, I joked that they almost became too comfortable with it because they had seen so many, and they were like, oh, he's just having a seizure, it'll be fine. Yep. But I'm like, seizures can be medical emergencies, guys. You have to understand.
That's right. My daughter Grace, she had an experience. She was volunteering in an organization called Little Bit, which is a therapeutic riding center here, and she would just walk along the side of the horse when the student or the rider was on it. And the very first time that one of her riders had a seizure, she came home to tell us, she couldn't tell us who it was because of HIPAA, but she, my student, my rider, he had a seizure, and the horse knew what to do. The horse, all of a sudden the horse stopped and it put its head down, and Grace didn't know what was happening. And then the other woman went, oh, okay, and let's hold her up. And they just, put their hands on both sides so she couldn't fall off the horse. And then she came out of it. And then the horse lifted its head back up and kept walking, And I just had Paula Delgadis, who's the executive director of Little Bit here, sitting right where you're at just a couple weeks ago. And we were talking about how horses have this extra understanding because the horse felt the aura. Yeah.
Well, that's how they train seizure dogs.
Really? It's same.
Yep. And I got to see a seizure dog live happen once, where the girl was with the dog, and the dog started kind of nudging her leg, and he goes, I'm going to have a seizure. He's telling me I'm having a seizure. And I didn't really ask her. I was like, were you feeling an aura yourself or whatever? But she said, yeah, I'm going to have a seizure. And they ended up going into a tonic-clonic seizure. And the dog, and natural instinct, I went to do first seizure first aid, which is supporting their head, turning them on their side, because people do drool when they're having a seizure. You want to lean them on their side. And the dog's like, get out of the way, dude. I know what I'm doing. So, I ended up doing it, but the dog was kind of like, it was weird. I was like, I wanted to be helpful. And then the dog was like, no, I've been trained on this, so.
Step aside, please, for the expert. That's fantastic.
Yeah, but animals, it's crazy. Their intuition. I've never met a seizure cat, but I know they exist. Someone has told me that their cat, will come over and curl on their lap. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but it was many years ago, and someone told me that the cat can sense a seizure. So, yeah, it's fascinating.
Wow, that's
first time I've heard of a horse, but not surprised. Not surprised at all.
The horse knew, and I've watched these horses; they're amazing. And actually, so we have a mutual friend, Matt Lorch, and Matt's the auctioneer for your fundraiser this year, and he has invited you have invited me to be the MC. Matt and I actually did the gala for a little bit as well. Yep. So it's nice. This community of those of us that all support people with disabilities is great. And we're fortunate to have Matt. He's actually, I believe he's in Costa Rica right now enjoying.
He just got back.
Or did he get back? Yep. Okay, because he's going to be sitting right there here pretty soon too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's
good.
Over as well.
Good. He'll be great.
So if you could give the tidbit of information that somebody who doesn't know anything about epilepsy.
Biggest thing I hear, and I would say myself, is people don't want 911 called a lot of the time because they're going to be okay. Now, there's what we call a 5-minute rule. So the biggest thing, if you see a seizure, start timing it. And because if it gets past 5 minutes, that's a medical emergency, and you do need to call 911. But the majority of seizures will resolve on their own. And we did a training at a fire department several years ago, and the guys were like, this is great. When we talked about surgery, we got into deeper stuff than they were interested. But they said the majority of the time when we show up on a call, the seizure's over with.
Right.
And I was like, we're educating the public, and hopefully one day just know that when you're getting a call, it's because it's been past 5 minutes and it's an actual emergency and it's worth, the trip. But they were like, the most part, they're confused. It's natural when they're coming out of a seizure. They have to be reoriented. But I would think the majority of people would say, hey, just make sure I'm safe. I don't have a knife in my hand. Make sure safety first. I'm not wandering into traffic. And then keep track of time, and the majority of the time I will be okay. Right. But that's probably the biggest message I would say most people would want to be delivered.
That's perfect. That's what we're looking for. Awesome. This is so much fun for me to learn more about you and your wife, Amanda, and Emily and I, have gotten ourselves in trouble around the fire pit at one of our local restaurants.
We keep waiting to do that again. But someone keeps pushing us off.
I know. We were burning cheese in the fire pit and frying French fries in the fire. Yes.
Dude, I laughed so hard my stomach was hurting.
Yeah, I know. That was fantastic. So how can people find out about it? How can they get in touch? How can we were talking about the philanthropists of our area and how wonderful and giving they are and can be. How can people support your foundation?
Well, our biggest event is in March 2nd at the Westin in Bellevue, is our fundraising auction that both yourself and Matt Lawrence will be supporting us with. And information on that can be found at epilepsy.com/Washington. Again, all proceeds support and pay for the camp for our kids and the adult programs that we offer. Depending on where you live and where you're listening from, I guess, I'm also the executive director in Oregon. We have a camp, so epilepsy.com/Oregon. We will, and we do an event in Oregon coming up in a couple of weeks at Top Golf, and that's March 10th. We do it every year. So the gala's every year, typically March timeframe. Top Golf event is March timeframe. And all proceeds from those events fund the Oregon camp. So that's probably the biggest way to help.
Awesome. One of the things I want to talk about the camp really quick. So I was on the Governor's Committee for Disability in the state of Washington for many, many years, and we had a camp for kids with disabilities. Mm-hmm. And my experience in being part of that was that quite often it was the first time that these kids really got to open themselves up to other kids that are in similar situations with them. So they didn't feel, like you were saying earlier, that they did it alone. And some kinds, this was the first time these kids had ever been away from their parents. Mm-hmm. They got to go to this camp and be a little bit individualistic, mm-hmm. on their own without the support. And what I love about the camps and what you're doing and what the Governor's Committee does is that it gives these kids ownership of their situation. That they walk away from that camp not being embarrassed about the fact that they have whatever the situation is, that they learn how to talk about it, they see other people that are mentoring them with it, and they come out of it stronger human beings because of the time that they've spent with the volunteers and with other kids that are in their same situation.
And again, and then
love that.
And then it's more special when they come back and volunteer.
That's right.
That's kind of coming full circle when they're giving back their time.
Yeah, I just had an experience where Emily and I were at a grocery store, and this little girl, she came over and reintroduced herself to me, and then I remembered that she was one of the students at camp, and she got to tell me, because I get to do the keynotes, so mm-hmm. that's my fun job at camp for the Governor's Committee. And I talk to these kids about owning their disability. Me being in a wheelchair, it's easy for me to show them, hey, you know what, I've embraced who I am, and this is my story that makes me unique from everybody else. And she came up and grabbed me and gave me a hug and said, Barry, I got this job because you told me that I could do this. And I thought, oh yeah, this is cool.
So our camp dates, Barry, you're going to come, are June 30th to July 3rd in Stanwood, Washington, just outside Marysville. It's a beautiful piece of property that they have right on a lake. But yeah, we'd love to get you to,
you bet.
Come check it out and see the kids. And yeah, we've had kids in strollers that are, nonverbal, and
right.
they're basing the parents come, and so it'd be cool to have you out there.
Oh yeah, we'll do that. That's fantastic. Well, Kev, this was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and for taking the time and for grabbing my dog food. And one last question for you.
Yes.
What is your favorite dessert?
Probably a nice chocolate cheesecake. I'm a cheesecake fan, and I'm not a huge sweet tooth fan, so I don't have like dessert at night all the time, but I do like a nice, fancy cheesecake or something.
Nice. I like it. Cool. Thanks, Kev.
All right.
We'll do this again.
You bet.